Welcome back to the Arise interview, where we speak to the newsmakers as well as ordinary people doing extraordinary things around the world and featuring the voices at the heart of the stories. I'm Charles Aniagolu. So a perilous presidential transition in America, one that's never been weaker than now, with one president refusing to pass the baton as Americans and the world watch with growing anxiety. After weeks of noise from President Trump about alleged electoral fraud, but still no evidence to back his claims, the transition is turning out to be a minefield for Joe Biden and his team, accompanied as it is by a determined, churlish unwillingness by the Trump administration to assist the Biden team in any way. To promote further disruption and to attempt to back his unsubstantiated claims of voter fraud, despite election officials declaring the ballot to be the most secure in U.S. history, Mr. Trump has unleashed thousands of his supporters on Washington, D.C., flag-carrying demonstrators joined by far-right groups wearing helmets and bulletproof vests. But he's also under growing pressure to admit defeat in the election, with two Republican governors the latest to say on record that the handover should start. Meanwhile, the former National Security Advisor John Bolton has urged Republicans to counter Mr. Trump's rigged election narrative. And former President Obama has also been speaking out.
I would distinguish between the very real policy differences that exist between Democrats and Republicans, and some legitimate tough issues, whether it's abortion or it's taxes. People have different views, and democracy is always going to be contentious. I distinguish between that and the demonization of opponents, the flouting of institutional norms and rules that govern how our democracy is supposed to function. The kinds of things that I saw over the last 4 years that endanger democracy operating the way it should. Yeah. And I think that what Joe and Kamala can do is to level set, to reestablish that we don't use the Justice Department, for example, to go after political enemies, that we don't mingle personal business interests with the business of government, that there's an expectation that the president doesn't routinely lie or reshape the truth to his own convenience, that he doesn't call journalists enemies of the state. Those kinds of things, which in some ways we became numb to over the last several years. I think that's the stuff that can be fixed, and Joe and Kamala will set a different tone.
That's the former U.S. President Barack Obama there. Well, for her take on the political turmoil that the U.S. is currently embroiled in, I'm joined now from Los Angeles by the impressively talented on-air personality, poetess, and CEO of Morris Media Studios, Felicia Morris. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. I know it's early in the day in LA, so we appreciate very much indeed your getting up to talk to us. And of course, one of the reasons why your assessment is particularly important is because you've worked not only with some of the biggest stars in America, such as Jamie Foxx. I think you co-hosted some radio shows with him, but also you've been a prominent radio personality in Los Angeles and can certainly feel the pulse of America through your widely listened to podcasts. So what do you think of the political mess America is currently in?
Well, I have to certainly say it's something that I've never seen in my lifetime, but at the same time, I'm very hopeful with the Biden-Harris team coming in to take over America.
When you say you're very hopeful, what does that mean in practical terms?
I feel that over the last 4 years, we've kind of been in a nightmare. So when I say hopeful, there's a whole new regime coming in to kind of, I don't want to say um, make things normal. I think things will definitely be different from this time on. But when I say hopeful, I think that it's going to be more about the people this time around.
Right, and I suppose the question is almost moot, but I'm going to ask you that anyway. Are you a Democrat voter or a Republican?
I'm a Democrat.
From that point of view, what do you make of the fact that Donald Trump is refusing to concede defeat?
I would compare that to a big baby throwing a tantrum. He's coming off like a terribly spoiled brat. I'll say I won't even be mad if we see visuals of him being actually escorted out of the White House by security. So I think it's selfish. I think it's harmful to a lot of people here in the United States, especially because we have this terrible pandemic going on and it continues to rise. And he is not allowing the Biden campaign to come in and start making moves to help save lives and help to get this pandemic under control. So I think it's a very, very selfish and harmful act.
Well, of course, those on the other side of the Mason-Dixon line, to put it that way, would probably say that you would say that, wouldn't you? So instead of looking at it from the point of view of your criticism of Donald Trump, we'll probably return to that a bit later on, let's look at it from the Biden perspective. I mean, is the Biden camp, the Democrats, being complacent by being silent on the failure of Donald Trump to accept those results?
I mean, what could they really do at the end of the day? Because legally, he doesn't have to call Biden and concede. So they know at the end of the day that they won. So it's what, maybe 60 days out before he's January 20th comes around. So I don't know that there is very much that they can say or do right now, but at the end of the day, he is on his way out, period.
But I mean, shouldn't they be saying more about where America is now? Because I mean, it's looking less and less likely, isn't it, that the US is going to have an orderly transition? Because I mean, President Trump is obstructing even that.
Yes, but I think right now the Biden camp is preparing. You know, they're preparing to get this pandemic under control. So we've never seen anything like this in American history, where a president had the behavior of Donald Trump. But I think at the end of the day, the Democrats are preparing, and I think their priority right now is not focused on Donald Trump conceding, but getting this pandemic under control.
Well, I mean, you talk about not seeing anything like this. The rest of us in the international community are absolutely aghast at what is happening in America, because the belief has always been that democracy in the US is apart from the rest of the world by consistently having an orderly transition of power. And for all intents and purposes, Donald Trump is disproving it by his rather unpresidential comportment right now.
I was about to interview you and ask what you guys think, but I'm sure it must be we must be a spectacle during this time. But I really do believe that Biden and Harris will put things back in order. I think they'll mend a lot of the worldly relationships that Trump shunned. So I think that once they're in place, I really believe that they'll get things pretty much back in order on a on a worldwide level.
But I mean, you've got your pulse on the community, as it were. You're a well-known sort of radio personality. You've got your own podcast. You've got your own media institution. I mean, what is you obviously also hear from people who support Donald Trump. I mean, are there many of them around where you are?
You know what? There has been a few people. I have a podcast studio, so it's just not my podcast, it's the community's podcast. And so we've had a few African-American Trump supporters come through and participate on some of our podcasts. And I found that I was pretty surprised at how many Black people supported Trump. And the white people that support them, because we had a guest on that was, a Trump supporter, and his following was a bunch of, white people. So I believe that there are more Black Trump supporters than we know, because a lot of them are not sharing that information, but I don't think it's an overwhelming amount. But I do think it is more than what we know. So there are people in the community that I live in that, yes, supported Trump.
But of course, California, where you are, and Los Angeles particularly, is a very, very blue state indeed, isn't it?
Yeah, but you see, a lot of the traditionally red states also have turned blue. So that's just a testament to me that people really want him out. Although a lot of people voted for Trump, like just over 70 million. So I don't know what that says about America, but a lot more people wanted him out.
Well, I mean, when you look at those videos, and we're looking at one of them as we were talking with you, of a lot of people marching in support of President Trump, some of them right-wing groups wearing sort of bulletproof vests and helmets and that sort of thing. I mean, what does that tell you about what's likely to happen going forward in America?
That tells me, on the grand scale of things, that's not a very big crowd. They tried to say it was like millions, but that was just over 10,000, maybe 11,000 people who showed up. And it was the same reflection at his inauguration, that he tried to say there were more people at his inauguration than there was at President Obama's. But as you see, their campaign has been full and riddled with lies. And that's nothing but a super spreader event, if you want to know the truth. I mean, we're in a pandemic, and all these people are out here with these big rallies for Trump, not wearing masks, not being responsible. So I don't think it says anything else but being irresponsible and not caring about the American people.
Okay, Felicia, stay with us. We want to talk with you some more. You're watching the Arise interview. Plenty more still ahead as we continue our chat with the on-air personality, poetess and CEO of Morris Media Studios, Felicia Morris, who's joining us from Los Angeles. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Arise interview. I'm Charles Anyegolu, and as you might have heard, Donald Trump is still resisting growing pressure to admit defeat in the US presidential election and begin the transmission of power to the president-elect Joe Biden. Mr. Trump tweeted that he has conceded nothing, and later also tweeted that he won the election. As you can imagine, that is increasingly frustrating the US President-elect Joe Biden and his team, who are being blocked from getting access to government funding and officials. Well, my guest today is a well-known US on-air radio personality and media entrepreneur in the Los Angeles area, Felicia Morris, who is keen to welcome a new Democratic government with Kamala Harris as America's first female black vice president. A visible black woman on such a large stage exciting not just her, but millions of people in America and around the world. And the on-air personality, poetess and CEO of Morris Media Studios, Felicia Morris, is still with me from Los Angeles. Thank you very much indeed for staying with us. Let's talk a bit about you. You've had an extraordinary career, haven't you? I mean, you made your radio debut at the age of 5 on a soul station in the San Francisco Bay Area. Your father, of course, the popular disc jockey Johnny Morris. Briefly tell us about that and how you've evolved since that time.
Well, I pretty much grew up in radio. Like you said, the first appearance on the air, I was 5 years old. My father was a legendary radio DJ and broadcast engineer in the San Francisco Bay Area. And just being around him and the excitement of being in the entertainment business, I knew at a very young age that's what I wanted to do. And as soon as I finished high school, I immediately pursued my career in the entertainment business, starting as an intern at a record company and getting my start in radio with Lee Bailey's Hip Hop Countdown on Report. And then I started working at the number 1 urban station here in Los Angeles, 92.3 The Beat. And then from there, I was there a number of years. And then after that, I was working with Jamie Foxx, who is a longtime friend of mine. Actually, we met when we were both starting our careers in the early 90s. So we teamed back up and I produced several shows on his Foxhole network on Sirius XM. And after that, I decided when that gig was up, I really did not want to look for another job. The landscape of radio certainly has changed with the podcast and internet radio. So that's the direction that I decided to go in, podcasting, giving the people in our community a voice. And that's where I'm at right now. I love it. I've been in radio 30 years now, so I have enough knowledge to kind of run an internet radio station. So that's what I'm doing.
Well, that sounds really good. And of course, Jamie Foxx, for those who may not know it, is of course the Academy Award-winning, Oscar-winning actor who's also a singer and a producer. But I mean, in addition to being an on-air radio personality, Felicia, you're also prolifically into poetry, turning your poems into rap songs and, you know, I think, you know, landing recording contracts on the same label as Tupac and having your album's first single breaking the top 10. I mean, not a bad outing if you ask me.
Well, you know what? When people read back my my resume, I'm like, wow, is that me? Yeah, that was many moons ago. I was actually a rapper on Interscope Records. I was the first female rapper on that label, and Tupac and Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch and Gerardo were my roommates. And some people may not remember, but the great actor Mark Wahlberg was in Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch. So I did have a fun rap career, which eventually led me into my radio career.
Well, I mean, I have to say that I can't wait to read your book when it comes out. I hope it comes out soon because, I mean, the anecdotal stories in there would be absolutely fascinating. And of course, after all that, I think you touched on that earlier, you began your journey as an entrepreneur and you currently own Morris Media Studios and do your own podcasts.
Yes. Well, I'm actually producing a couple of podcasts, but I do plan to launch my very own podcast in January 2021. I kind of miss being on the air. So I'm like, why not? I could practically do any type of podcast I choose because it's my company. But I've been kind of standing back in the background, building up the company and letting other people have the opportunity to do their own podcast. But at the top of the year, I'm finally going to launch my own. So.
I mean, you do let us know when you do that, because I'd certainly like to listen in. But I know what you're talking about. I suppose if you've got broadcasting in your blood, you do have withdrawal symptoms when you're not sort of doing it, don't you? But I mean, let's move away from you and back to the larger sort of American politics. Where do you think this current political impasse is going to lead? I mean, it seems as if it's cleaved America in half, and rather like Humpty Dumpty, it might be difficult, if not impossible, to get the broken parts back together again.
Well, like I mentioned earlier, I have a lot of hope that things will be better. I think the Trump administration has kind of opened our eyes to, or as they say, peeled the scab back on a sore in America, which is racism. I am hopeful that people will, I don't know about the Trump supporters that are hardcore, like the Proud Boys and all that. I don't know if there's much you can say or get them to unite or be open to ideas, but I am hopeful. And so many people are kind of relieved that Trump is on his way out, because we don't know what he would have bought in the next 4 years. I mean, especially with the pandemic on the rise. But I think with Biden-Harris, it has brought some hope back to the American people. And I just think it'll be better.
Okay, and just a word from you about COVID and lockdown. I mean, we're hearing that America is being ravaged at the moment by COVID, and how you've dealt with it, how much work you've been able to do, how much it's hampered your plans. I mean, how have the last few months been for you from that perspective?
Well, I have to say that I'm pretty blessed in the way that I've been able to maintain my business, keep the doors open through the pandemic for people to administer information. Our studio actually allows social distancing, but it has definitely changed. We lost half of our clients because a lot of them don't want to come out. But we found ways to, supplement our income by doing webinars. People are still coming in to do audiobooks, and people are still doing their podcasts. But like I said, it's not as, my clientele is probably 60% less than it was. But by the grace of the community and some of the programs and grants they have out here, it has definitely helped me to keep my doors open. So now I'm actually taking a COVID test today, and I'm going to take a 2-hour course tomorrow to be a COVID safety officer of my business. So we're taking precautions because we definitely want to keep our clients safe and of course ourselves.
Right, okay. Well, Felicia, I wish you all the best, and thank you very much indeed for talking to us. Felicia Morris is the CEO of Morris Media Studios. She's also an on-air personality and a poetess. Thank you ever so much. That's it for this edition of the Arise interview. Join us again tomorrow from me and the entire team here in Abuja and the United States. Bye-bye, and thank you for watching.